Majid, you made a lot of very powerful points in your speech just now, but let's address the elephant in the room, because there has been some controversy about Dubai and the UAE hosting COP28. Do you really think that Dubai is a suitable place to host such an important conference on climate change?
Absolutely. So when you say there's been controversy, maybe from a London perspective. Not here, or not in the 7 billion, as I mentioned. And that's the real problem, the real concern I have, is this sort of high horse virtue signaling from, I'll call it what it is, forgive my bluntness, from places like Europe, which are threatening to undermine the entire process. So we saw at COP26, first of all, let's look at the last two COPs. Scotland and Egypt, both oil and gas producers, right? None of the controversy that you refer to. So there's a double standard there to start with. COP26, the oil, gas, nuclear, and coal industries were deplatformed. These are the industries that produce 90% of global energy. They were not even part of the conversation. And it wasn't even the British government. It was a certain agenda that took over the COP office. And it undermined the whole meeting. We also saw finger wagging at the climate, at the developing countries, India and others, who have been waiting for the $100 billion of climate finance that was promised in Paris and has never come forward. So what did we see in Sharm el-Sheikh? The language changed. The 7 billion now are not talking about the 100 billion. Prime Minister Modi of India said should be at least $1 trillion to start with anyway. They are now talking about loss and damage. They are now talking about you, the developed countries, who colonized all of Asia and Africa, used our resources to fuel your own industrial development, and are now somehow lecturing us that we shouldn't have stable power while you enjoy it. And what's the first thing you all did in Europe at the first sign of a crisis? You all turned your coal plants back on. Every single one of you is subsidizing energy that you lectured us not to. Except if you're rich, they don't call it subsidy if you're a rich country. So in the UK, it's energy support. But it's 50% of your electricity bill is an energy subsidy. And the third thing you're all doing now is coming to the developing countries, like in Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, asking for the gas you refuse to finance for their own power, as long as it goes to Europe as LNG, because you're worried about your own electricity supply. That's the hypocrisy, frankly, that is grating in developing countries today in Africa and Asia. Why the UAE? It's the perfect place, in my view. First of all, it's a big investor in all forms of energy. Not just in oil and gas, but in renewables. Masdar was established way before other countries grabbed the mantle. And actually, Dr. Sultan al-Jaber was and still is the chairman of Masdar before his role in ADNOC. That's not being, of course, reported. And proving up hydrogen at scale is going to come from countries like Saudi and the UAE that have the resources, both funding and the gas supply, to be able to advance these technologies. Second reason is what you referred to in your great opening remarks, Neil, the geography. This is the best place to bring north, south, east, and west, which is what is needed for a true dialogue. And the third and important point, which is related to that, is the unique relationships the UAE has with the African countries, with the Asian countries, which are so important because ultimately this whole challenge is going to be won or lost there. And the venue itself, the Expo, was granted to Dubai because it was the first expo that paid for the LDCs, the lesser developed countries, to have their own pavilions, the poorest countries from places like Africa. So it is an inclusive venue for the world. So I think for all those reasons, it's going to be an inclusive COP, a successful COP, and it's the ideal venue, regardless of supposed controversies and narrow dialogues that may happen in Europe.
Thank you. Well, I think you nailed that one, Majid.